it's a new beginning. The world turns but my head is spinning. I can't wait for the next arrival. There's more to life than just survival.
Today's session is very much around the emotionally healthy leader, and we do want to make it really practical for you. So we want to introduce you to some concepts and get you really thinking about what it means, but also here's some tools and techniques that you can actually do something with.
The important thing about this experience in emotional health is we all know it, we just don't usually put the words to it. So it's something about every one of us having had an experience of being in an emotionally healthy environment with leaders, and environments where it was the complete opposite. And often the language we find, we hear ourselves from other leaders and from people in organisations, and you'll know this even within the world that you live in, particularly in an environment where you're also learning. There are people in those environments that actually inspire you and make you feel like a champion. And you walk away going, wow, I can do anything. And there's a real experience of that. And the other side of the coin, often when we're talking about lack of emotional health or an unhealthy leader, is that we find ourselves in situations where we feel actually quite hopeless and useless. Everyone experienced that? I'm not alone. What we'd like you to do now is get into the tangible, because as you work in your groups over these next 3 days, you're going to experience situations, I'm sure, that are going to make you feel great, inspired, you want to get on with it, and there'll be times when you're sitting back going, what is going on here? Why do I feel like I'm making no contribution? What's going on here for me that's causing that? And is it something or someone in the environment that's making you feel more hopeless and useless than you need to feel? So what are the characteristics that have inspired you that you've seen in leaders? And what about those situations where you've walked away going, never again, I don't want to be around that person? What we find in these environments is that when we're down here and we're feeling like this, the language that tends to come up and the experiences we tend to be in live around this sort of world. A world of blame, a world of defence, a world of justifying, a world of denying. And you'll know, we're not telling you anything you don't know here, that this is a perfectly natural and normal way for you to work out what you need to do to stay safe. So in these environments, often what we find is this is also about shutting down. I'm not going to put myself into this situation. I'm not going to be as vulnerable in here. I'm going to keep safe. So it's that amygdala protecting us. It's actually working with us to keep us safe. And when we're in that space, in terms of emotional health, we talk about discretionary effort and personal responsibility. We take responsibility for ourselves, for others, for our learning. So from an emotional health environment, when we're up here and think about these next 3 days with your teams, what can you do to have them above the line with discretionary effort, really making a contribution? What does that actually mean? And it's good to keep that in mind as we move through this process, because it isn't just about sitting in the room going, okay, everybody's going to be above the line now. Everyone can make a choice about where they are. We can choose to be above the line. We can also be pushed to go below the line, or we can choose to go there ourselves. Between the stimulus and the response, there's a magic quarter second of choice. You have a choice. Stimulus, response, and in the middle, a choice. So for an emotional health world, one of the things we often talk about is, where are you with that line of choice? Are you just below it? Are you just above it? Are you way above it? Where are you? Where do you sit in that emotional health regime?
The great thing about this event, of course, is everybody's coming together wholly and solely based on this piece up here. This is all about inspiration and excitement and, you know, all of the possibilities. However, you just need to be conscious that there may be things that occur that can actually push you below the line. and different things will push different people below the line. This model is one of those things we can use to monitor our internal thinking. So often our thinking might go here, but we have a choice about the actions and what we do with that. So this model, I'm going to say, is really important. So there's something about how do you take this model back to your teams to actually recognise that, because sometimes things can happen and we think there's nothing wrong with what we might have done, but it's had an adverse impact on someone else for a whole range of different reasons. So this is about taking notice of your own internal impact, but on everyone around you as well. So I think it's probably one of the easiest ways of understanding this is that our red line in above and below the line sits between level 5 and 4 through the middle. And we like the above and below the line because it's a very simple tool for us to use as leaders, and it's very easy concept to introduce to teams and groups we're working with, sort of to set a standard of what we expect. What this model tells us though is that when we had that automated or reactive response, our degree of behavioural freedom at that point in time was limited. It was not the best thing that we could have done. So it's something we need to be really conscious of, because ultimately we sort of backtread a little bit. However, level 5 has many more automated responses than the reactive ones. The reactive ones we can really see. But I want you to think for a moment, when was the last time you had to delegate a task? How many of you actually said to yourself, actually it's quicker and easier to do it myself? How many of you said, actually they're not going to do it to the right standard that I want, I'll do it myself? How many of you said, everybody else is so busy, I need to do it myself? Who's used one or more of those various things? Yeah. We tell ourselves these little stories to excuse us not doing something. You know, as a leader, some of the things we need to think about is, well, in my team, perhaps I should be developing capability in other people, and perhaps I need to teach them, and maybe I need to engage them more rather than just trying to do it myself. In business, so from a business point of view, we see people between levels 3 and 6. So if you're thinking about the organisations within which you're working, the people employed in the organisation are likely to live between 3 and 6. Of course, your clients can be in the whole spectrum. Probably more likely to be into the bottom half than the top, probably the higher top half. And we'll talk a bit about that in a moment. So because we have, from a business point of view, we're going to focus a little bit more on 3 to 6, just to give you a bit more of a sense of that, because they'll be, to a large part, a more common experience perhaps for you. But level 6, which is the one underneath, you'll see that our degree of self-centeredness is increasing. Our degree of behavioural freedom is decreasing. So what happens is, as an individual, we're starting to feel as though our needs are not being met. I'm feeling as though I need to do something. I'm feeling more vulnerable, insecure, unsafe. So I tend to use exaggerated behaviours to get what I need. In the workplace, we'd say bullying occurs at this level. So on one hand, we can see all the yelling, shouting, all the aggressive behaviour, but we can see the total opposite, which is total withdrawn, hiding, not engaging. So we can get the complete opposites and everything in between. So within an organisation, you only need 10 or 15% of behaviours at this level to cause quite a significant amount of dysfunction in that environment. I want to step above the line now, which is to level 4, which is a level of recognition. So this is when we've activated our inner observer. So this means we're starting to watch ourselves and the impact we have. Some models will talk about being on the balcony and watching yourself dance. Now, we often use the example of when you go for a job interview. We often move into this space, and that is, interviewer asks the question, we answer the question, and we look in their eyes for just this tiniest little bit of recognition, a smile, a nod of the head, something that sort of says what I'm saying is meaning something to what they're talking about. Of course, at level 4, we live in that space all the time. We're always taking notice of that. So at level 4, which is it is above the line, is where we are now really starting to take conscious note of what am I doing, what's my impact, and what do I need to be doing. Who here plays sport? Most people? Okay. I want to introduce another layer to this model because at the moment everything we've been talking about has been very cognitive based. The reality is emotional health levels is far more than a cognitive based approach. And the reason why I asked about sport is because if you've been involved with sport and purely because of your training so far, I'm sure that you would have read lots of articles from either sports psychology or the like, which is around sports people who describe being in the zone or being in the flow, or what we would call is being present. We have 3 centres of intelligence that actually help us with this. So we have our body, which is often referred to as our gut, instinct, which we use. We have our heart, which is where intuition comes from, and head or insight. So we have 3 centres that are really important in how we integrate those 3 centres. So when we're in the zone, we have all 3 centres integrated. The reality is if we fall into this bottom level, we're operating out of one of those centres. If we're in level 4, 5, 6, we're operating out of 2. And in the top, we're starting to operate out of 3.
So for us, as Malcolm said, the most critical thing is to understand that you can't get to high levels of emotional health by thinking. It doesn't work. You actually have to engage in practices that bring in all 3. And so for those of you who do martial arts, yoga, meditation, anything where you're starting to connect the centres, it's a great step up in building your emotional health.
So one of the things, of course, is that as leaders, where's the best place to be? We're just going to be level 4 or above would be fantastic. We have a personal goal, of course. We'd like to be present all the time or be in the zone. We know well from a sporting terminology that sports people do really well, but we know people in normal life, if they're present, also do extraordinarily well. So I want to talk a little bit more about how do we do this? What does it actually mean about starting to move up the emotional health levels? This model is really great to take back to others in your group as a way of cognitively also monitoring. However, we need to be conscious about working with our whole body. Physical activity is really important. So when we look at our body, our instinct centre, that is about connecting to our body. This is where physical activity, whether it be walking, sports, or whatever it is, helps to get us connected. You all know from a medical point of view that our health is like holistic. It's not, you can't sort of separate from one to the other. We need to be looking at all facets and how it connects. So it's even more important for us to actually move up the emotional health levels is to connect into the 3 centres. We need to be able to connect to our body, we need to connect to our heart, and we also need to clear our head.
So in terms of why would we focus on all of this, the interesting thing for us is we've been working in this field now for over 10 years. And finally, and what's great, is that the scientific research around this work is starting to be really looked at. So the whole world of neuroscience and the interaction of the different centres and how that affects the way you lead and engage with others is starting to happen. And so now people are talking about vertical development or emotional health. They're talking about not the what of leadership, so not the competencies, not how to build great teams, not how to deal with difficult people, but the whole sense of what does it mean for me. And in order to do that, we're going to engage you in a little bit of self-assessment. So we have emotional health levels on paper. It's a very quick and zippy test. This is definitely not the, in a sense, the cure for you in terms of understanding where your emotional health is. But it will give you some sense in 9 areas that we look at, we call distinctions, 9 leadership distinctions. Where do you fit? What's going on for you? Where's your level of emotional health?
Creating the word of how we'd like to be starts to create a new neural pathway. So if I think about my lack of confidence and self-esteem in the first instance, then often my thinking patterns continues to create a neural pathway that was always there. So intent is a way of starting us to create a new neural pathway, a new way of being, a new behavioural set and way of thinking and feeling. one of the things is when we want to create something different, embodying is one of the most important things. They actually talk about, if this is what we want to achieve in the future, we need to look at how do I want to be in that creation. So thinking it's not enough, it's actually embodying it as well. And one of the best things I can say is if you think about, when you go to a gala dinner and you put on your brand new clothes and stand in front of the mirror, look like $1 million, you automatically change your posture, the way you walk, the way you interact, everything changes for you. Intent and embodiment of that intent does exactly the same thing. So when we talk about intent, we always say you need to write it down or tell someone or share it with someone.
Just thinking it won't make a difference.
It's not enough just to think it.
We had a CEO, just to finish, who came and said to us, I want to be calm and peaceful. He was a really grumpy, angry man. And so we suggested intent, and as he walked his dog every day, he'd say, I want to be calm, I want to be peaceful. And we saw him 3 weeks later and we said, how are you? And he said, my dog's really calm and peaceful. So we knew something had happened. He'd also changed. We didn't care that he thought it was his dog. At least we knew that something was working.
A way of integrating emotional health into the global health context is through what the point of this conference is through having good leaders, and being a good leader is so many different things. From the logistical side of things to the knowledge side of things, and also I think what this session highlighted, the emotional side of things. So being emotionally present and aware and prepared to be a good leader and to follow that, and using those sort of emotional skills to mediate how you follow through with whatever the purpose of your leadership position is.
In terms of the global health context, I think it's really important to be an emotionally healthy leader so that you really can be self-aware and are able to regulate your own emotions so that you're able to facilitate a team towards a common goal. And I feel that this is very important to learn, as you will often encounter difficult situations where you'll need to tackle those head on in the right way so that your team can move forward. So I think in terms of global health, there are a lot of different people who are passionate and motivated, and it's learning how to deal with each individual and respecting their own opinion so that you can move forward.
I think if I could talk to other people about leadership and emotional health, you would have to say that they're pretty intertwined. Being emotionally healthy is integral to being a good leader or a productive leader, and that's something that I think you can sometimes lose focus on, and that's definitely something that I would encourage other people to focus.
The next arrival, it's more to life than just survival. Life than just survival.